Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Life Show. Happy Tuesday and happy championship week, everybody. I am your host, Ian Hartitz. It is a great day to be great, whether or not you did make the championship. I mean, definitely more so if you did. But if not, we can take off of Happy Gilmore 365 days to get ready for the next one. And accordingly, we have the man here to help you do just that. The one, the only Fantasy Life Director of Analytics, Dwain, The Rock McFarland. And Dwain, life is good, man.
Life's good. Got all of the Christmas gifts wrapped. Ian, moving forward in the Guillotine League, we'll be talking to Mr. Thor a little bit later. We got a surprise for him. He's going to come on and talk about some risers, some prospects in the college football playoffs. But down to me and Friedman, who we will have another show with here very soon. So it's going to, and Friedman is in town. I don't know if we need to do some sort of special, maybe get together, drink some beers, video it. We'll just stream it. We'll talk to producer Swing. We'll just stream that. Probably won't be able to air most of it though.
Rivalry week here on the Fantasy Life Show. Where's my team in that? Oh, we got eliminated like 2 months ago. Whatever, Dwain. We'll worry about that next year. So before we move on to some utilization and sheesh goodness, as we do every Tuesday here on the Fantasy Life Show, did want to break down just one of the most exciting, actually most boring Monday Night Football games of the year. Packers blanked the Saints 34-0. It was actually the first shutout in the NFL this season. So pretty cool for anyone out there trusting the Green Bay DST and those semifinal matchups. So good enough game from Jordan Love and Josh Jacobs. Dwain, had a short touchdown from Love. Jacobs found the end zone himself, picked up over 100 total yards. But Packers just really didn't need to do much of anything out there. This was 21-0 at halftime, and it never even really felt that close. So we'll note Josh Jacobs was seen, with his arm dangling a little bit coming off the field in the third quarter. They did give us a sideline update, though, that the Packers said he was fine. They just wanted to get other running backs involved because, they were absolutely toasting the Saints out there. One injury, though, that could have some unfortunate, repercussions moving forward, though, Dwain, is Christian Watson once again dealing with a lower body injury, this time a knee issue that had him questionable to return. So you'd like to think he'll be fine for week 17 and beyond. Again, wasn't exactly a game that needed to force him back in, but if Watson is out, your boy Dontavian Wicks, maybe Dwain gets to slide right back into the starting lineup.
Yeah, I don't want to trigger everybody again. I don't want to trigger myself again with Dontavian Wicks. But, he was out there doing Dontavian Wicks things again last night. Ian, only out there for 53% of the routes. He got more playing time after that Christian Watson injury. Had a 38% targets per route run. This man gets targeted a ton. I get it, guys. He doesn't always catch it. For the most part, though, drops are not a very sticky thing. And I know when you watch Dontavian Wicks, like you can see, he doesn't have the natural hands of like a Jerry Rice or anything like that. But as long as you're getting targeted, you got a good quarterback like Love, and you've got big playmaking ability, which he clearly has. He had a sheesh moment, I believe, there, Ian, that you can talk about. But he had that touchdown early in the game. I don't know what that defender was doing. It looked like he was going for like a flag. Like he was clearly just flailing around on the play and acting like he was getting picked. When no, this is the guy that's going to run the route that you have to cover. You're not getting picked on the play. That was my defender in an IDP league, so luckily I didn't get penalized for all of that, Hartitz. But if we have Dontavian Wicks on the field without Christian Watson, he moves into that boom bust wide receiver 4 territory. Could easily give you a wide receiver 2 week. It's a Packers offense where I think we have learned, though, even when one person goes down, they have other guys they want to work in. We still have Bo Melton. We've got Malik Heath. It would be Wicks getting most of the work. So again, like he could give you some goodness, but they love to spread the ball around in Green Bay.
Obviously, Jaden Reed, the number one wide receiver there, more weeks than not. I know the second half hasn't been all that great, but did find his way to 76 yards on just 4 targets yesterday. Dwain did mention the Shishi Wicks moment. It wasn't really his fault, but I don't blame anyone for turning this one off sooner rather than later. But at the end of the game, he did break pretty wide open on a slant and seemed to be well on his way to scoring a 40-yard touchdown. Unfortunately, Malik Willis's target was batted down at the line of scrimmage. So Shishi stuff there. Only other note I would say is that we saw the return of Luke Musgrave last night, and Dwain actually did take Tucker Kraft's route rate down to 60%. So already been kind of dealing with, not exactly an overwhelming target share on a week-to-week basis. Again, a situation where we love this Packers offense, and I'm sure they will score plenty of points next week at the Vikings. That said, again, tough to be overly, reliant on anyone in fantasy other than a league winner Josh Jacobs, of course. Meanwhile, for the Saints, Dwain, they scored 0 points, and it wasn't particularly surprising. We have Spencer Rattler out there with pretty much nobody to throw to. The one good thing we thought we could pull away from this was second-year talent Kendre Miller taking over the backfield. Not exactly what we saw out there, though.
Yeah, they decided to split this backfield 3 ways, with Jordan Mims getting 43% of the snaps. You know, it's one of these scenarios where late in the season, we just never know for sure how they're going to look. Let's be honest. We never know for sure what a coach is going to do anyway. Like, we try to do the best we can with the data that we have to say this should be the next guy up. And, you know, you would think that would be Kendre Miller, Ian. And technically, like, he was the guy. He had 40% of the rushing attempts, 20% to Jordan Mims, but 15% also to Jamal Williams. So they just didn't feed him. And if you're an offense that is as bad as the Saints offense, honestly, you need the whole workload to have any sort of chance. I mean, honestly, looking at Alvin Kamara and the workload he's had this year, had he been on a good offense, Ian, we're probably talking about a league winner. But because he's on the Saints, we're talking about a guy where, like, oh, he's a nice floor play. He's going to give you 15 points on his 35 touches. And you're happy to take those points, but it's just an offense that you mentioned it, man. Like, can anyone really even name all the players that are now starting for the Saints? I mean, I honestly, it's tough to go back and remember a team this banged up at all the skill positions.
I mean, even MVS, who was kind of hilariously coming on at the end of the year, he couldn't even go out there and play last night, man. So it really is rough in that passing game. They get the Raiders next week, so you'd like to think maybe that's a game where, I don't know, they can get to 14, 17 points, Dwayne. Maybe that's still asking too much.
Give me the under.
Yeah, man, seriously. So I don't know about you, but look, we weren't lining up to play Kendre Miller this week, but I was hopeful that he would get a dominant 3-down workload, and then we could trust him against the Raiders. After seeing this, though, man, probably still going to be tough to get him inside that top 30.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've got all the teams available to us, mid-range to low-end running back 3 at best after this.
So, guys, we have plenty of more utilization goodness to get those rosters ready for Championship Sunday. First, though, did want to go through some other big news and notes here that, you know, went down an ever-eventful Monday here in NFL world. So, first of all, Nick Sirianni did confirm that Jalen Hurts is in the concussion protocol. Obviously, you know, a big game for the Eagles, still trying to get that number 1 seed this Sunday against the Cowboys. Also note, Giants quarterback Drew Lock undergoing an MRI on his shoulder, just, again, right when you think the Giants finally found something. No, I'm just kidding. The Tank Commander is what they're calling him on Twitter these days, Dwayne. Not sure if Drew's going to get a chance. Tommy DeVito going to be the next man up there in a smash spot for the Colts DST. Also note, Browns quarterback Dorian Thompson-Robinson dealing with a calf injury. We never want NFL players to get injured, albeit this would be a little bit, you know, of an easier one to deal with, considering, yeah, we could actually trust the Browns passing game again. Running back Chargers did designate J.K. Dobbins to return from IR. His 21-day practice window has been opened. We'll see if he can get out there, but great article from Jeff Orrich has noted, yes, Dobbins does have plenty to play for financially with some of the incentives in his contract. Also, no 49ers running back Isaac Guerrero is expected to practice this week while dealing with that hamstring injury. So, yeah, Patrick Taylor was pretty terrible. Would be a lot cooler if it's Guerrero getting that featured role. Also, no Seahawks running back Kenneth Walker listed as a DNP with that ankle injury to start the week. Zach Charbonnet would be a top 15 option at the position against the Bears if if Walker is sidelined. Justice Hill not practicing. Miles Sanders could be back. We don't really care. Big news with the Texans, though. Tank Dell, dislocated knee and a torn ACL and some other damage. So pretty much worst case scenario from what we saw from that gruesome injury. Hate to see that. Texans did accordingly claim Deontay Johnson off of waivers. We'll see how quickly he can get caught up there. And note, John Mechie with that shoulder issue said he's good to go. Finally, Ravens wide receiver room is banged up. Zay Flowers still not practicing with that shoulder, and Nelson Aguilar in the concussion protocol as well. And also David Njoku now dealing with a knee injury in addition to the hamstring. This dude is a walking injury at this point. And Trent Williams for the 49ers done for the season. So that was the news. But before we get to some sheesh, time to talk about some guillotine chop contests. Love me some guillotine leagues. Maybe I'm not cool enough to be in the finals like Mr. Dwain over here, but new league, new me, guys, because we have a brand new playoff football format only found on Guillotine Leagues. We are introducing the Championship. That is right, the Championship is a survivor-style playoff fantasy football tournament where you pick players, survive, and advance. Really cool rule set, guys. There is no draft. You simply pick the players who you want. There's no free agency. You select the players, and those are your your players for the entire NFL playoffs. Each week, the lowest scoring 25% of teams will be eliminated. Now, teams can pick the same players. However, the catch is you can only pick 3 players max per NFL team. Tournament sizes range from 25 people all the way up to 500. But a little bit of a pro tip here, you will want to pick players on teams that you think will go the furthest in the playoffs while also being unique enough to differentiate yourself from the competition. So there are cool free-to-play contests and also some paid ones for those trying to make a little bit of money. Personally, my favorite is the $100 25-person tournament. That can be found, again, only at guillotineleagues.com. Make sure you go to the contest lobby to enter. Again, that is guillotineleagues.com, and go check out that contest lobby. Sheesh is right, Dwain. That Sheesh report where, we remind you of some of the beyond the box score tilting near miss moments that simply made fantasy managers and anytime touchdown bettors say sheesh. And what other way to really get the sheeshes flowing than by going through the unrealized air yards leaderboard. As always, we are really just trying to quantify the total missed opportunity on incomplete targets. And Dwain, not the most, sheeshy week here. We've seen guys have 150 plus, only saw, a week high 92-yard mark from Khalil Shakur. But Shakur, Jackson Smith, Najigba, Malik Neighbors, A.J. Brown, Tyreek Hill, DJ Moore, Robert Woods, and Marvin Mims, all guys who wound up with 70-plus unrealized air yards. So the Shakur note, I think, is especially interesting because we have seen him more so in that lower A-dot role. And also JSN. Look at this, Dwain. 2 slots that are also being used down the field, man. What a concept.
Yeah. Getting these slot guys down the field against linebackers and safeties that sometimes can't cover them. Yeah, who would have thought of that? But yeah, Khalil Shakur, man, it was nice seeing that 17.7 average depth of target this last weekend. So a very different role. I don't think it's something that we're going to see all the time. But anytime you get something like that, it's nice to see that they've got that in their bag. A lot of that did come on one big play. They could have nearly been a touchdown. It was going to be tough, though, for Shakur to make that play. It was a low for him from a standpoint of fantasy production, only 3.2 fantasy points last week. But the other important thing here, Ian, is we saw his route participation rate bounce back to 91%. The week before, It was down to 65% with the return of Keon Coleman. So, yeah, I think there's a lot to like about Khalil Shakur. I know we've had Amari Cooper arrive. We've had a lot of different things going on there, but he is the top guy in Buffalo. And we've got Josh Allen, so we love that.
One guy who did not crack the unrealized air yards leaderboard, but still had himself a sheeshy week 16. Xavier Worthy, Dwain, someone who we have unfortunately had the privilege of highlighting several times this season on the Sheesh Report, had a potential 24-yard touchdown where he made a nice catch, got 1 foot down, 2nd foot, though, ended up clipping his 1st foot, so he didn't, make the catch. And then also, seemingly with Mahomes targeting Travis Kelce, Worthy jumped in front of the pass and dropped a potential 9-yard touchdown. So, look, good things are starting to happen for Worthy. His role is increasing. He's moving in the right direction. But man, Dwain, this dude has been close to some huge performances this season.
Yeah, Xavier Worthy actually made the risers section of the utilization report this week. His utilization score, which goes 0 to 10, up 0.6 points, which is a lot. And that's over the last 4 games, once you're this late in the season, because it takes quite a bit to move the score the more games we have. So, I mean, looking at, I've got a player that is getting targeted more often than what we've really seen at any point this year over the last 2 games. Ian, he's got a 29% target share over that span with an 8.5 utilization score. And that's really what's pulling him up. It'll be interesting to see how they handle this. You got Hollywood Brown coming back to play his first game this last weekend. Didn't really have a full-time role. Didn't even play 50% of the passing play. So it'll be interesting to see does some of the playing time for Hollywood Brown come from Xavier Worthy, or do they take it away from guys like Justin Watson, Juju Smith-Schuster? You would think it would be more of those guys, but honestly, sometimes deciphering Andy Reid is not as easy as we would think. So we'll see how it plays out. But it is nice to see, at least over these last couple of games, they are trying to get their rookie more involved, and that gives you a chance in fantasy. Over these last 2 games, Ian, he is averaging 17.1 fantasy points per game. Ooh. So trying to come on at the end of the rookie campaign. It's not been a good one for Xavier Worthy. It's been pretty sheeshy all the way around, but at least they're trying to get him the ball now.
14 combined carries and targets in back-to-back games. That is not too shabby of a workload there. So you mentioned Justin Watson. He also popped up in the Sheesh report, courtesy of a dropped 31-yard touchdown. So I know a lot of these drops with the Chiefs players makes it sound like Mahomes is getting no help. I will say, if you guys have been watching, the deep ball compilation, if you will, to Xavier Worthy this year, Mahomes certainly has been the man to blame for several of those, long overthrows. Hasn't been hitting the deep ball as well as we've seen in past years. But that said, we have been seeing some sheeshes as well. So all that and so much more in the sheesh report. We got guys that got tackled at the 1 yard line, didn't score a touchdown, defensive pass interferences, and, look at all the interceptions to see which ones were actually on the quarterback and which ones were maybe a bit more of a fugazi, as Dwain would say. So all that and so much more in the sheesh report, of course, presented by our friends over at Mike's Hard Lemonade. And guys, with the fantasy football playoffs in full swing, hopefully your dreams of winning the championship are still alive. You've worked hard to get this far, and we're here to remind you that Mike's Hard Lemonade is the reward for a hard-earned thirst. That championship will make sorting through waivers and dealing with sheesh moments so worth it. And guess what? So will a cold, refreshing Mike's Hard Lemonade, because hard days deserve a hard lemonade. All right, Dwain, now we put a bow on the pain and suffering caused to us in week 16. It is time for the utilization report presented by DraftKings. And kudos to you, my friend, for getting, a little bit of dad humor, holiday cheer here in some of the categories we're going to be going through, kicking things off with Taj Spears, Dwain, bringing tidings of comfort and joy.
I really messed that one up. I should have said Taj Spears brings the Titans comfort and joy, right? It's close. I'm just sitting here looking at this. I'm like, how did I that was low-hanging fruit, Hartitz. I was definitely not on top of my game. But yeah, I mean, look, if you're feeling around the bottom of that stocking and you've had Taj Spears all year, guess what? It's no longer a lump of coal, Ian. You actually have a fistful of fantasy points over the last 2 weeks. It's been really nice. Now, we've had game scripts where it's been troubling for the Titans. They've been in this trailing role. We've talked about Taji a few times this year. Hasn't just quite been able to stay healthy, but it looked like he was starting to take over the passing down role a few times along the way. That's kind of stuck over these last 2 games. So that's the first thing. The other part is we do have Tony Pollard dealing with an ankle sprain, over these last 2 games. So that could also be part of it. But man, Taj Spears looking good on these opportunities, and over the last 2 games, he has been the Titans running back 1. Still more of a split or a committee, if you will, not like this 1 versus 2, more of a 1A, 1B. But in that lead role, which we haven't seen all year, he's got 57% of the snaps over these last 2 games with a 7.6 utilization score versus Tony Pollard now at a 5.0 utilization score over the last 2 weeks. So, like I said, the things I feel the most comfortable about, Ian, with Taj Spears, number 1, he looks good. Like, this guy looks healthy. This looks more like the version of him we saw last year, making guys miss. He's got that acceleration. He's solid in the passing game. But the part that I am the most confident is that passing game role. If you look at it, he's taken over the 2-minute offense over the last 2 weeks, as well as all of the long down and distance work. So can't guarantee that he's going to be the leading rusher if they get into a game where they're leading and Tony Pollard is actually feeling healthy. But it does feel like it's more of a mixture of these 2 guys at a minimum. And I'll be honest, the Titans could also just ride the hot hand. So if I'm in fantasy and I was ranking them this weekend, I put them right together. And again, first pass at the ranks, doing them on Monday instead of a Tuesday. We don't have all the information, but I put Taj Spears 1 spot ahead of Pollard just on vibes alone.
Both guys certainly set up well against that Jaguars defense. Second worst in PPR points per game allowed to position, and bottom 3 specifically in receptions and receiving yards allowed to opposing RBs. Of course, Dwain, if we do see Tony Pollard taking like an early seat on the bench for the season, really would be boosting Spears up into that top 15, if not top 12 range out there. However, probably a bit unlikely because, as Jeff Orwich has noted, Tony Pollard needs 83 more rushing yards to get to 1,100. That would trigger a $250,000 incentive. 2 more rushing touchdowns for 7. That would get him $200K, and a mere 19 more receptions, Dwain, to get up to 60 to get 200 more K. Not so sure that last one is coming, but maybe Santa Claus has, a different plan in mind. He certainly has, been coming with a different plan for Mr. Keenan Allen, Dwain, someone who didn't have 50 receiving yards in a game until week 12, and now he's a fantasy football league winner. Funny how these things work.
Yeah, it was called Fat Keenan to start the season. Well, now it's Keenan Claus. I mean, Keenan has been absolutely a monster. We've talked about him multiple times. Pant size gone up a couple of sizes. No, obviously, like we can all see that. But man, like it's really been more of an issue with the injury, I think. Early in the year, if you remember back to the preseason, he injured the heel week 1, late in that game, trying to go for a touchdown pass at the back of the end zone. He stepped wrong on that foot again and really just wasn't the same player until we got to the bye week. Got a little bit of rest, but over these last 4 games, Ian, man, Keenan Allen has been absolutely on a roll. You can see it here on the screen, 95% route participation, so never coming off the field. Target share 32%. That's the 5th in the NFL over that period. Fantasy points per game, 20.4, 8th most. So utilization score sitting at 4th overall over these last 4 games. So yeah, it does appear that the folks thinking that Keenan was old and fat, that was going to impact his fantasy performance. Again, I think a lot of that was just to do with being injured. Keenan's still Keenan. And, I get it. He gets to play inside in. He gets to play, from the slot. But he's 32. He's still going out here at 32 years old, and I get it. Beating linebackers, safeties is easier than beating these outside cornerbacks. But, man, he's not just a check down merchant. If you look at his average depth of target, guess what? It's higher than a Amon-Ra St. Brown, who everyone loves, and they don't call him just this underneath check down guy. JSN, the hot commodity everybody wants. His average depth of target is lower than Keenan Allen. I get it. Not the same yak player he once was, Ian, but let's just give Keenan Allen a hat tip. Still balling out at an age where a lot of players are not balling out anymore. Most players are just not in the league anymore. So Keenan, yes, more of a borderline wide receiver 1. It's tricky. You have other targets in the offense, Caleb Williams, up and down. So there are still issues with Keenan Allen that make him someone. It's hard to make him just a lock to be in the top 12. But, man, I think at worst case, you got to make him a mid-range wide receiver 2 the rest of the way based on this utilization.
Since Thomas Brown took over, he has a 9.8 yard average target depth. Roma Dunes is up there at 12.8, but the real loser from that scenario, Dwain, has been DJ Moore, just 6.4. A lot of usage in terms of him as a running back, which I don't mind, but it's really starting to come at the expense of what he can do on the outside. For this season now, only Devon Achane actually has more total screen targets than DJ Moore, which I don't really know why that's a thing, but it actually is out here. So you mentioned it, man, mid-tier wide receiver 2 status for Keenan. Obviously, the highest ranked bear at this point. You have a wide receiver 17 in the first passive rankings ahead of guys like Juwan Jennings, Zay Flowers, Tyreek Hill, Drake London, George Pickens, amongst others. So yeah, feeling pretty good about Keenan getting into the most important game of the fantasy season. Again, facing off against the Seahawks defense that has improved a little bit this year, but also not exactly going to sit here and call them a juggernaut. So more wide receiver goodness to get to, everyone. But first, want to give a shout out to our friends over at DraftKings. Grab your favorite team's jersey and some snacks and head to the couch for another Sunday of action-packed football. You can get even closer to the action with my partners at DraftKings. And right now, all new DraftKings customers who bet just $5 will get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Just download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and sign up using the promo code FantasyLife. The crown is yours. That's right. New customers get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins after betting just $5. If sports betting is not yet available in your state, don't worry. You can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy and have the shot to win cash prizes. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use the promo code FantasyLife and bet just $5 on any wager to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. That's promo code FantasyLife only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Dwain, some might say it's a Hollywood jolly Christmas for the Chiefs. Again, your words, not mine. Great job. But yeah, Hollywood Brown's back, and he looks good out there.
You're not trying to take credit. You're just distancing yourself. You're like, I didn't write this. Dwayne wrote this crap. Yeah, man. Hollywood Brown, first game back. I was listening to this on the way down to Houston for some Christmas festivities. And I'll be honest, I thought he was on the field more because every time I was hearing a target in the first half, I felt like Hollywood Brown was the name getting called out. So I was thinking, man, this guy might be sitting at an 80% route participation or something like that. Wasn't the case. Only 33% of the Chiefs' passing plays had Hollywood Brown on the field. So still could just be getting reacclimated. But I will say with the Chiefs, it is always tough to know what exactly they're going to do. Now, we did see Rashee Rice eventually take over a full-time role last year. We have seen Xavier Worthy really all year being a full-time role. So I don't want to say that it can't happen for Hollywood Brown, but we need him to take another step forward. Justin Watson still getting playing time. Juju Smith-Schuster also getting playing time. You like to think, Ian, that he could just take over those roles. We'll have to wait and see. But here's the one thing I do know, man, getting targeted a ton when he is on the field, a 53% targets per route run. That by far led the Chiefs. That's an astronomical number. And we've seen Hollywood Brown historically be someone whenever he's been in an offense, back in his days with Kyler Murray, he had a stretch of games there there where really they didn't have DeAndre Hopkins. Funny enough, DeAndre Hopkins is the other guy opposite of him here. But man, he was an absolute target magnet in those games. So we know he can get out here and get it done. We also know that if you go back a little further to his days with the Ravens, he's got that big play potential to get over the top of the defense. Hasn't quite been the same player since all the injuries he's dealt with, but I'd love to see a chance. I'd love to have a chance to see, does he still have that with Patrick Mahomes? So I upgraded him to boom bust wide receiver 4 territory. I think we have to expect his role to expand. The only question is how much, Ian. But if it did get to a point where this guy was out there 80, 90% of the snaps, how high would you move him in your ranks?
I mean, if we just knew that before, we got the fantasy gods nudging us into a dream or something like that. I mean, I'm looking at your kind of, again, mid-tier wide receiver 3 spots. We got guys like Adam Thielen, Khalil Shakur, Calvin Ridley, and Jacoby Myers are wide receiver 30, wide receiver 31. If we could be assured of the full-time role, Dwayne, I think we can get Hollywood in the top 30.
Yeah. I'm with you. And so because we don't know, I've basically put him a full tier below those guys. Like he is in the next tier down in the middle of that one, which you kind of get to a range of guys that are more hit or miss, right? And that's why we call him boom. We call that boom bust in the industry. So he's one of those guys that if it did go your way, though, I will say last week, man, the passing props were way too low on this guy. I took the overs on that. It came out at 17. Shout out to Jeff Ulbrich on our site. He actually put it out in the newsletter that morning. Ulrich was all over it saying that, hey, this is something that's just too low. We've seen this historically. It happened with Puka Nacua. A lot of these guys coming back, the books are just too low. For some reason, their models just handle it in a weird way. So I think he's a guy that if he is out there, say even 60, 70%, he could perform as well as those wide receiver 3s. But yeah, mid-range wide receiver 4 this week.
Great stuff from Jeff, as always. And make sure you guys are subscribed to that always free Fantasy Life newsletter if you are not already. So last note would just be, I know it's a tough matchup on paper against the Steelers, but they haven't been this, juggernaut just shutting down one wide receiver after another. I mean, over the past 7 weeks alone, Devonta Smith, A.J. Brown, Terry McLaurin, and Zay Flowers have all reached triple-digit yards. Also seen Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Jerry Jeudy put together more than usable performances as well. So Joey Porter Jr. got banged up last week. They've had some other injuries to worry about. I understand it's a little bit late in the year, but maybe we finally get, again, a Christmas miracle, if you will, and have this Chiefs passing game do some big things here on Wednesday. Dwayne, let's talk about, again, a potential dream of ours, because fantasy managers are dreaming of not a white Christmas, but a Jameis Christmas out here. Yeah, man, maybe we'll get some snow in Cleveland as well. I would not be hating that. But again, DTR dealing with that calf injury. Jameis dealing with the right shoulder issue, but you know what? It's one of those things where it's like, is he really hurt, or are you maybe just, trying to get him out of the way so he can get on with his tank? So thoughts on just how big of a drop off, Dwayne, it really is for all these Cleveland pass catchers with DTR versus Jameis under center.
Yeah, and it's massive. But real quick, just on that Kansas City thing, I know fantasy playoffs are at the end, Ian, but you talked about the guillotine leagues that are going for playoffs. Hollywood Brown is a name if you're thinking about the Chiefs. Right now, if you look at odds to get to the Super Bowl, the Chiefs are the highest. We want teams that are going to play in all the games, and a way you potentially differentiate if you're setting up Chiefs stacks on teams is to look at a guy like Hollywood Brown. But yeah, back to dreaming of a Jameis Christmas, and it's pretty easy to do after you've just experienced Dorian Thompson-Robinson. We've had 2 games before this where he had not even gotten to 175 yards passing in a game. That's still holding true, Ian. He had 157 yards in this one. So it's just going to be hard to support Jerry Jeudy, Elijah Moore, David Njoku. Still Cedric Tillman could be coming back, taking a bit to come back from that concussion. So get well, Mr. Cedric Tillman. Yeah. There's too many weapons here for a guy that's not going to be able to throw for 200 yards. And honestly, look, DTR scrambling around doing some stuff fantasy wise, but just looked really lost going back and watching a little bit of that film yesterday afternoon. Basically validated what we saw in my short time watching him on Red Zone. So I think this is a major struggle. We need Jameis Winston back. Without him, you're just not going to be able to have these guys in your lineup. David Njoku was the guy, Ian, that was was able to hold off the loss of fantasy points, but still, it could go against him this week, right? It could be Jerry Jeudy or Elijah Moore getting the game where it's like, okay, they're decent. And it could be David Njoku left out, who you mentioned now is also dealing with a knee injury on top of the hamstring injury. So a player that's injured, low ceiling offense without Jameis Winston. So for me, that downgrades David Njoku to a low end tight end one. That means he's going to be benchable in fantasy championship games. You might have a better option. I would say Jerry Jeudy downgrades to boom bust wide receiver 4 territory, and Elijah Moore, like, there's no reason to really even have him on your roster at this point.
Maybe some of us, Dwayne, have a couple best ball teams left, and we're hoping for something from Elijah Moore. Okay, not pointing any fingers, but I will say, man, sadly, again, I hope DTR is okay, but it does sound like he is going to be playing out there. And this was the exact quote from Kevin Stefanski when asked about it. Yeah, I mean, he played through the calf the whole time, so give the kid credit for that. That happened on the first couple plays, but any injury, you just have to be careful and make sure that you treat it. But yeah, of course, hopeful, yes. Stefanski's always kind of close to the vest, but that to me, man, does sound like that DTR probably will be doing everything he can to play through this issue. Again, hardly an easy matchup here against the Dolphins, but we've seen Jameis dice up the Broncos for crying out loud. So if he can find his way under there, we are feeling better. But there's also this horrific potential scenario, Dwayne, where we don't get DTR, we don't get Jameis, and we get Bailey Zappi. And I actually pulled this stat yesterday. Among 55 quarterbacks with at least 200 plus dropbacks over the last 2 seasons, Bailey Zappi ranks 55th. DTR ranks 54th. Deshaun Watson ranks 50th. And Jameis all the way up there at 37th. So, again, not trying to make Jameis out to be this real-life savior or anything like that, but really can't overstate, Dwayne, just how horrific all of these quarterbacks in Cleveland have largely been for the better part of the last 24 months.
Wow, and Bailey Zappi challenged Mac Jones for the starting job in New England. Okay,
Yikes.
Let's stop talking about. Can we stop talking about bad quarterbacks? Come on, give us Jameis for one more week. I'm with you, and he's not like a guy that's going to win an NFL championship, but he can definitely help us win some fantasy championships. That's just such a man. Jerry Jeudy, the vibes were so great, and now it's like I can't even use him. I mean, the guy was a borderline wide receiver 1 with Jameis. Now we've got someone we can't even have in our lineup. It's a tough life in fantasy.
Got that 1,000-yard mark. Help prove, Dwayne, that maybe we weren't completely crazy for overdrafting that dude, 4 years running or whatever it was. So I will say with the EPA stuff, I've heard some pushback, recently over in the old Twitter sphere about it being more of a team stat. Dwayne, you've seen a lot of stats in your life. What stat isn't a team stat to some extent? I mean, it is football, 11 men out there, yards per attempt, passer rating, yards per carry. All these things tie into each other's. And honestly, it's one of the reasons why I do think maybe moving forward, particularly at running back, man, where I think we can agree the most kind of teammate dependent position out there, maybe put a little bit less weight behind some of these stats and maybe just start focusing a bit more on the bigger team picture. It's a balance, I know, but maybe some thoughts, because especially, man, like the Josh Jacobs, the Saquon, some of these running back stats of the world, man, really had just no predictive measure for what happened in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, and something we studied a lot last offseason. First, shared a lot of that information in the free agency previews for last year because we had this huge class with Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry, and people were worried about their drop in efficiency. And the study that I did basically showed that efficiency is just not sticky year over year. It's also not a huge factor for how many fantasy points you score. The bigger factor really is how large is your role, which also, guys, was, just how many attempts you had was much more predictive of next year's attempts and next year's fantasy points than whether or not, you average 5.5 yards per carry or yards after contact, explosive rush rate, missed tackles forced. I tested all those things. Running backs do tend to own their missed tackles forced and their yards after contact, but it doesn't always translate to fantasy points. So that brings us to the next part, right? Which is what you're talking about. It's the quality of the teams. Of course, once we get into that, Ian, we have a lot of the same challenges because there's so many moving parts. Like, is the offensive line going to stay healthy? Is the quarterback, going to keep them in manageable downs and distances that allow them to run the ball in optimal situations where defenses have to expect pass and run? There is so much that goes into this, but you are 100% correct, man. It is all interrelated. So it's hard to get away from any of these stats, or I don't want to say it's hard to get away, but if you say that about one stat, it really does apply to a lot of them. So it is a challenge, but it's something that, it keeps me excited about doing this work because always looking for what is the thing that might actually unlock some more value for us in fantasy. I will say, and how much time I spend researching these things, 99% of my quests on these things, I end up with nothing. I get to the end of it and I'm like, okay, like I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but it's not any stronger than like other things we've already studied in the past. You always learn something along the way, Ian. You try to take away a silver lining, but it's a sport where everyone is dependent on one another, more so than really any other game out there that I pay attention to anyway, like baseball, basketball, hockey, these other games.
I love the people at PFF and True Media, Next Gen, everyone who gives us these new, cool Next Gen level stats that we can get excited about. Anything you can do to help quantify what we're seeing with our own two eyes is a win in my book. But you bring it up quite often, Dwayne. The most predictive measure for future fantasy points is the utilization score, which is awesome. But otherwise, it is fantasy points out here. So again, as much as we continue to move forward, time is a flat circle, if you will. Targets, rush attempts, and those things do tend to again be more predictive than most. So plenty of months ahead to go ahead and grind that foam, grind those stats, and get better. But also, guys, we're going to go ahead and get a jump start on some goodness here with our friend Thor Nystrom, going over some of the biggest risers after an eventful, full of blowouts. Pretty good one by them Ohio State Buckeyes in the first round of the college football playoffs. So great stuff here on tap with Thor. But first, a quick word to our friends over at GameTime. Dwayne, we both know there's nothing like being at a game in person, especially around the holidays. But the cool thing about GameTime is it's not just limited to sporting events. You can also find amazing tickets for concerts and shows too. I know the McFarland family certainly is a big fan of Hamilton, man. So if you're trying to get out there and check out some more plays here soon, make sure you go through GameTime, because I was actually scrolling through the GameTime app the other day and I came across my new favorite feature called GameTime Picks. And let me tell you guys, it is a total game changer. GameTime Picks curates your experience, showing you the best deals on great seats, and GameTime makes it so easy that it is truly a no-brainer, people. Seriously, GameTime takes all the guesswork out of buying tickets, and you can find out for yourself by downloading the GameTime app, creating an account, and using the code LIFE for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, you can create an account and redeem code LIFE, L-I-F-E, for $20 off. Download GameTime today, because what time is it? Game time. All right, guys, now we have a very special guest, one of Fantasy Life's finest. That's right. If you guys are into college football, the NFL draft, or all the above, well, then I am pleased to tell you that we have the one, the only Thor Nystrom joining the show. And, just with the NFL, obviously draft coming up, with the college football playoff going on, we thought it'd be a really good time to get in some of the just bigger risers. Had a lot of great ball going on last week. And, Dwayne, it's just a great time of the year, man, for festive, good vibes and all that, right?
Yeah, I can't wait to get into these risers with Thor. But before we do that, we just have a little bit of a bone to pick here with Thor. Now, here's the thing. Thor is one of the best college football analysts on the planet, hands down. He's also a great trash talker, which we found out in our Guillotine League. A+ trash talker. The problem is his mouth was writing checks that his team couldn't cash. So we just got to hear a little bit here from Thor. And some of the things, Ian, that he said were really hurtful. And believe me, my team and we did not forget. And so we're moving on, but Thor's not. So let's hear some of this trash talk from Thor.
Josh Allen, certainly a must start. And hey, 51.8 fantasy points last week. Wow. That was incredible. Crazy. Yeah. Incredible. He's on my aforementioned Guillotine League team against my coworkers. Hey.
Final segment of Fantasy Football Weekly. Thank you for joining. Yeah, you can still get in late season Guillotine Leagues. Let's get to our final two matchups, Thor. Green Bay's taking on the Seattle Seahawks. What are you doing this week?
I don't have to join a new Guillotine League because I got my coworkers, Dwain and Ian, in a blender. I probably haven't mentioned that yet.
If you started Cooper Kupp, you need dart throws. You need some magic to happen. Find a quarterback wide receiver hookup or a quarterback tight end hookup that maybe you can exploit.
And if you're one of my coworkers playing against me in a Guillotine League, just give up. It's over.
Hey, at least you kept it close, Thor. I think you lost to me by only like 50 or 60 points this week.
I was so confident. And then David Montgomery gets injured for the season. Everybody knows David Montgomery was my team spirit animal. It just made it too tough. But Dwayne, congratulations on moving on. Our hubris got the best of us this time. We will be back next year, though.
Hey, you had a sick team. When you have Josh Allen and Jamar Chase on the same team, and dude, this is the beauty of a Guillotine League. Ian and I are sitting here, we're talking about content. We're talking about skank leagues where Ian and I are trying to pick up names that nobody's ever heard of. Ian hit me up with a message like 4 weeks in. He's like, I like this Guillotine stuff. He's like, we're picking up Saquon Barkley and Jahmyr Gibbs. We're not having to go out here and pick up like a fifth string running back from the 49ers that they just signed last week. It's a lot of fun.
It is, and
Thor,
at the end of those stack rosters you get at the end, I've never been this far. So next year I got to go all the way, but even getting to the final three was cool.
Thor, before we get into actually meaningful content here, what the freaking freak was that noise going on that radio show, that calling, man?
Oh, the what do you call it? The peacock sounder. That one?
We thought it was a pterodactyl.
No, that's Tetaroa McMillan.
Okay. All right. Wow. Yeah, that's a dog right there.
You should have a contractual obligation that if they play that more than twice while you're on, that you just hang up.
Love that peacock sounder.
That McMillan, certainly a dog, Dwain. I'm sure he'll be at the top of your, wide receiver, super rookie model here soon. But going to start things off with a quarterback who, just kind of won the coolest game ever here last Saturday in Columbus, Ohio, Mr. Will Howard. Thor, not exactly been, just someone who we've expected to go in the first round, really at any point in his collegiate career. But all of a sudden, you go out there, you drop some of those balls in the bucket like he did. You're 6'4", 235 with some athleticism, and turns out you're a riser in the NFL draft process.
That's it. Yeah, and he's going to get drafted. He's going to get drafted on those tools. He's an interesting prospect, Will Howard. As you know, you have the size, you have the athleticism, and he has a decent arm. It's not a howitzer, but he has a decent arm. He throws a nice tight spiral with velocity. The where you go the other way with his evaluation is the guy's going to be 24 as a rookie when that season starts, and his mechanics are still all over the place. And so it's like, can we get him over that hump when he hasn't to this point? But he had the great game against Tennessee. He's had a solid season. That game against Tennessee was very important because, as you know, Chip Kelly went the opposite direction of the game plan that he had against Michigan, where they futilely just ran behind that bad offensive line the entire time against a good front seven. Tennessee game, Chip Kelly decides, no, this one we're going to do the opposite. We're going to throw, and we're going to have Will Howard try to beat Tennessee's corners one-on-one. We're going to let the game be decided by that. And Will Howard did. And not only do you put that tape out there, very good tape for Will Howard, the downfield shots, really good. He had the accuracy short and intermediate, threw for over 300 yards. Now you get that rematch with Oregon to try to help your stock again. I think Will Howard's going to go on day 3. But I think we still got a band of outcomes there where he could go. He wants to get closer to the start of the open of day 3. Keep playing well in the CFP.
So we'll stick with quarterback here, Thor, and my state of Texas. Who played against Clemson, took down Cade Klubnik, but he had the most passing yards this season against that Texas secondary. So a nice performance for him. Don't know for sure if he's coming out yet, but a 5-star recruit. What are your thoughts on Mr. Klubnik?
He has given himself the opportunity potentially to declare. Now, right now, he is still saying he's still going to consider it, and he might go back to school, might declare, but he has put himself in the position to potentially do it by the way that he played this season. He had another great showing against Texas. Texas has arguably the best pass defense in the nation, so you can't underscore how impressive it was for Cade Klubnik to go down there in Austin. Keep in mind, in round 1, you go to the higher seeded team. Austin being Cade Klubnik's hometown. That's where he is from. He left Austin to go to Clemson as that 5-star recruit you mentioned. But to do that damage that he did against Texas pass defense, I thought it was very impressive. He's not big, and he doesn't have a howitzer for an arm, but he's clever, and he can scramble around. And he got much better this year at reading defenses, going through the progressions, getting the ball out on time, continuing to work on that stuff. And his the other thing being the play under pressure and the decisions under pressure, continuing to work on that. If he goes back to school, you could potentially make a legitimate push up to day 2, I think. But you could also, if you're Cade Klubnik, decide to cash in your chips right now. He will be drafted if he declares. I just think he's going to get drafted somewhere around Will Howard in that day 3 range if he does declare right now.
Again, more like day 3 quarterbacks. I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to get into the potential day 1s of the world. But let's move on to, one of the most important positions in fantasy, and that is running back, with one of the, two-headed monsters in that Ohio State Buckeyes backfield, Trayon Henderson. Thor, from what I've read, it seems like Ashton Jeanty and then probably Caleb Johnson are consensus top 2 running backs. But man, you look at Henderson, he's got that home run hitting ability, not exactly small at 215. Do you think he could be the RB3 in this class when it's all said and done?
I think he's in contention for RB4 because and there's a group of them. But I think Omari and Hampton from UNC is also going to be in those top 3 running backs. But then you have this quagmire behind them. And this is where it's going to get interesting to see where these guys end up going, because this running back class, not only do you have the mega stud at the top in Genty, one of the best running backs we've seen enter the NFL in the last 20 years. You also have that tier 2 of guys that of Johnson and Hampton that are going to go right away in the second round. I think there's people that rate them as late first rounders. I think they're going to go early second. But then you have this big grouping of guys right after them that are jockeying for position there. Henderson is amongst that group that is going to go on day 2. It's going to be round 3. Or is it even going to be round 2? This performance was more indicative of a guy that looks like a round 2 pick. And I thought it was interesting, Ian, as you know, that awesome Tennessee front 7, one that had shut out the lights on other running games, they more or less shut out the lights on Quinshon Judkins. They did not shut off the lights on Trayon Henderson. He ran for 80 yards, was at 9 attempts. He did damage as a receiver as well. I think 54 yards, 4 receptions. Henderson behind that offensive line that has had some issues in that game, you saw. So Quinshon Judkins behind the line, he's always looking for the crease to develop. Both these guys have decent patience, decent vision, but Judkins could get stuck behind that offensive line with the penetration, waiting for a crease to open up. What I put in my write-up was he'll wait out the parting of the Red Sea and get swallowed by the ocean before it does. Whereas Henderson, he will denote that the danger right away, and he will dart away from it. And an over-pursuing front 7 can allow you lanes down the field when you can beat the over pursuit. That's what Trayon Henderson was doing in this game. At his size, very explosive, and you get the quick direction changes. And so in a matchup like this, his game was flowering out. You were seeing the best of him, getting away from that danger, getting into open space, and then sprinting away from people. Love his explosion, love his slipperiness. And I like that vision as well for Trayon Henderson at his size. The other thing I love about him is he's been, to go the other way in his evaluation, he has been a terrible pass blocker his entire career, and he remains a terrible pass blocker. But the last 2 years, you have seen a real jump in his game as a receiver, which was of crucial importance, because if you're not 220 pounds and you are not playable on passing downs in the NFL, as you boys know, your value is quite depreciated. But the last 2 years, he has shown that he can be an NFL caliber receiver. I think he only has 1 drop over the last 2 seasons combined on 41 receptions, and he gives you that run after the catch utility, averaging almost 10 yards per catch after the catch. Trayon Henderson, interesting prospect, and of course he has that big game on deck with Oregon too. Another big test for him.
Yeah, we love those pass-catching running backs, Thor. We'll stay with pass catchers here. The last 2 years, we've had huge performances from rookie tight ends. It was said that this couldn't happen. It could never happen. We had Sam Laporta. Then this year, Brock Bowers goes completely bananas, despite landing on a roster that already had Michael Mayer. So let's talk a little tight end here. Gunnar Helm, again, focusing on guys that played in the first round of the college football playoffs here that you think might have raised their stock for the NFL draft. What are your thoughts on him? He was stuck behind Jatavian Sanders, who was a 4th-round pick this last year for the Panthers, who was a 5-star recruit. Gunnar Helm, not as lauded coming out of high school, but there's some things here you like.
Gunnar Helm has been ignored and overlooked all of his life. I think he's a better prospect than Jatavian Sanders, that 5-star that just left, the guy that he was stuck behind. The guy who the tight ends coach at Texas, Jeff Banks, has told the media multiple times the story about how Gunnar Helm, after the 2022 season, sought him out to make the argument, I am better than Jatavian Sanders. I catch as well as him, and I'm a way better blocker. And this year he got to show that with Jatavian Sanders going in the 4th round of the Panthers last year. Gunnar Helm broke all of Jatavian Sanders' single-season receiving records at the tight end position in Austin this year. He closed that out in the last game, has passed him in everything. And, of course, he is a better blocker because Jatavian Sanders couldn't block a troll on Twitter. Gunnar Helm, 6'5", 250 pounds, was a 3-star recruit coming out, which part of the reason why he gets stuck behind Jatavian Sanders. But he got to work on his game And you see him this year in his first year as the starter. He's very polished. The thing he's not is like the tight end that you remember Kyle Pitts of Florida, like going down the seam and just posterizing safeties down the field. We missed that Kyle Pitts come back. But that is not the kind of tight end receiver that Gunnar Helm is. Gunnar Helm is the athleticism, I think, is going to be decent, but nothing special at the combine. You're not sending him down the seam. Where he helps your offense, it's with the timing routes. He knows what he's doing. He gets to his spot on time, and he pins the defender behind him. That's his special sauce. You're not getting around Gunnar Helm. It's like running around a cruise ship to try to get to the other side before it leaves the port. You're not getting around before that ball gets there. And then he's really smooth transitioning from the receiver to the runner, and then he's got to burst up field. So that is where he'll give you the 10-plus yard catches, just that smooth catch, immediately the runner, good vision, and then shooting up field. And then the kid can block a bit. I think he might overrate his own blocking ability. I don't see a crushing blocker, but certainly a guy that you can put in line in the NFL and you can feel comfortable about him. And he's certainly going to take care of those short intermediate timing concepts for your quarterback.
A lot of good tight ends in this class, it feels like. Obviously, whoever Iowa, turns out will be a star. We got Colston Loveland from Michigan doing good things. Usually at the expense of my Buckeyes. Tyler Warren, yeah, man. Ooh, a lot of good ones out here. So, Thor, again, you broke down those players and many more in your Risers article that you guys can all find on FantasyLife.com. Plenty more college football playoff content on the way there. And also on this very show, Thor, Thursdays starting off this postseason. Thor, we cannot wait, my friend. Thank you for the time. Anything else you want to get off your chest?
It's going to be a fun spring. Check out those risers on Fantasy Life. I'll be back throughout the next couple of weeks with the college football playoff with NFL draft columns like that. Awesome talking to you boys. Can't wait to do more of it this spring.
Going to be, again, a lot of fun breaking down all those future Buckeyes victories here with Thor. So appreciate you guys again checking out the Fantasy Life show. We'll be back with far more the rest of the week. And otherwise, have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever it is that you are celebrating. So for Dwain, for Thor, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning into the Fantasy Life show. And until next time, take care, everybody.